Welcome. This is Editor's Note. I'm Jonathan Hessen, of course, and in today's edition, I'm very glad to be able to say welcome to Mr. Ezra Cohen, Dr. Ezra Cohen, right?
Well, in the U.S.,
Technically.
we don't call lawyers doctors in the
Fair
U.S.
enough.
But
You have a PhD in law, so that pretty much expands to that. But formerly an acting Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, a part of the American intelligence community for a very long time, and a very astute man, in my opinion. Many remarks sees the region in a very clear way, which I very much appreciate, and nonetheless also an adjunct fellow at Hudson Institute. So welcome in Jerusalem. I'd like to take this opportunity. Obviously, it's Election Day in the United States, the implications of which for the Middle East in particular are going to be very significant if Kamala Harris takes over. I know many regional leaders from Israel to the countries in the Gulf are very concerned, which is an understatement, for what it may mean from a U.S. foreign policy perspective, as opposed to a second Trump term that we hope at least will look as in a continuation of what was back when the Abraham Accords were struck, when the sort of normalization was reached between Qatar and the GCC, where Iran was being suppressed on multiple levels for its malign behavior and has brought it to an all-time low at the time. All of that changed over the course of the last 4 years. We're seeing wars raging in every corner. What can you give us a little bit of a hope?
yeah, well, first of all, I just returned from the Gulf. I was in Bahrain over the last few days, and I think you're absolutely right. Look, the Biden administration, which was really just a continuation of the Obama administration, all the same people, really kind of, they're still holding on to this idea that you can have this negotiated grand deal with the mullahs in Tehran. It's a fantasy. And it has signaled to every single major adversary, all of the destabilizing forces in the Middle East, it's signaled to all of them that this is the time to push their advantage. We see this from Qatar.
Right.
We see this from Hamas. We see this from Hezbollah. We see this from Assad. All over the Shia militia groups in Iraq, Yemen, all of them are pushing their advantage now because they know that their parent organization, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is sitting across the table from an American government that still has a naive view of what their regime is trying to accomplish.
It really doesn't make a lot of sense to me because it's not like they're hiding it. They blatantly come out and declare their two key principled foreign policy objectives is to, and this is their terminology, remove American hegemonism, as they put it, from the Middle East, and to deepen their influence in neighboring countries, which we see the state of affairs in countries such as Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen. All those failed countries are where the Iranians are. Any country in the region which is stable and prosperous, from Bahrain, from the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, are stable and are prosperous. And that's where American influence is. So how can the current administration in Washington, which is the outgoing currently administration, not clearly identify the contrast between the two ways of life, so to speak?
Well, first of all, this current administration also questions American hegemony. They themselves question whether or not the U.S. should be this singular, strong global power of freedom. Remember, and so they believe in a world without borders, a global government. That by definition means destroy American dominance.
Right.
I'm not saying that they want to live under, hardline Islamic rule or something like that, but they also question whether or not the U.S. should be this strong guiding power. And so that's why I think they're at least willing to entertain these overtures from Iran. First of all, if Kamala Harris wins the election, it will be a continuation of what's going on now, but it will be even worse. Because at least President Biden has, some experience, decades of experience with kind of the more center foreign policy establishment. Kamala doesn't have that.
Well, I think, if I may interject, this is something that some may disagree with me, and I'm not talking about the health condition that Biden is in right now, but Biden is a Zionist. The definition of Zionism, for those who do not know back home, it's recognizing Israel's right, or the right of the Jewish people to have, within the context of self-determination, a nation state within the ancestral homeland, namely Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, the land of the Bible. And therefore, I think that once that is the foundation, we can disagree on foreign policy, we can disagree on the method of securing those rights, but that principle is necessary. I'm not sure Kamala Harris necessarily agrees with the premise, and she's been not overly outspoken about it. Of course, she has a lot of supporters who are anti-Zionists, who are against the Jewish right for a nation state, and therefore there are political implications also that are going to drive her foreign policy.
Look, if she was part of Congress, not the Senate, if she was in our lower house of representatives in the U.S., she would be part of the squad,
right,
with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and Jamal Bowman and all these other people who are avowed pro-terrorists.
Right.
Okay? So she's not part of that group because she was in the Senate, but that's her ideological origin story. It isn't kind of the, central establishment Biden camp, 20 years on the Foreign Relations Committee. And those are the people that are around him. Now, Kamala and kind of the Mali crowd have infiltrated some people into Biden's realm, and they're certainly way more anti-Zionist. But at the heart of it, I think you're right. So if she wins, it will be a continuation, but it will be worse for the reasons that you laid out. And what that means in real terms is Israel will be completely on its own. The U.S. will not. The U.S. will be waging a maximum pressure campaign, not against Iran. They'll be waging a maximum pressure campaign against Israel.
Right.
Sanctions, arms embargoes, pressure at the United Nations. They'll be rallying diplomatic pressure around Europe to constrain Israel. This can get a lot worse.
I think it's going to get worse already in the transition period between today and January 20th, where there is already talk about a type of UN Security Council Resolution 2334, as the Obama administration pushed, which brought about a new reality in this region, detriment to Israel, in which the various territories, including the Jewish quarter in the Old City, including much of East Jerusalem, as well as Judea, Samaria, the Golan Heights, and others, they're no longer disputed territories as they were, because this was under dispute. They're occupied under international law because Obama decided to abstain, and he pushed for that. Now, there is talk that the Biden team is working for something of sorts that will call for a ceasefire, that will call for a two-state solution, and will try and put Israel against the wall, so to speak. If that is the case, How would a Trump administration react to that?
So we went through this last time around. And actually, what people don't realize, and I'm not sure how much of this is public, but when Michael Flynn, who was President Trump's first national security advisor, was calling around to people like the Russian ambassador, which of course was kicked off this thing in the U.S. that we call Russiagate. He was actually calling all of these ambassadors to try to get them in the last 30 days of the Obama administration not to support this crazy resolution that Samantha Powers was putting forward at the UN.
Right.
And that's really what was going on. It wasn't about all this crazy stuff in the American media. It was about trying to kill this resolution. They're going to continue. They're going to do that again. But just like last time, I think what you saw in the Trump administration is we rolled back all of that very quickly. And we really didn't allow that to hamstring us in any way. I mean, obviously, President Trump, recognized the Golan Heights. He moved the embassy. He recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And so you will see a return to that. But what's going to be a further accelerant on the president's desire to really improve things in the Middle East is going to be the fact that Iran is closer than ever to a nuclear weapon. And he's going to know that his decision space is much more limited once they get a nuclear weapon. So he's got to act quickly. We didn't really have that last time. That pressure didn't really exist. We were more just kind of pushing towards this because we wanted to bring about peace and prosperity in the Middle East. Now it's peace and prosperity in the Middle East and stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And by the way, if Iran has a nuclear weapon, there will not be peace and prosperity in the Middle East.
Absolutely. Well, I think in contrast to the last time around, there was a lot of speculation back then about whether or not Israel could carry out those operations on its own and be successful. Naturally, if the United States would lend Israel B-2 bombers or B-52s, it would make things a lot easier. Nevertheless, the fact of the matter is, when we look at the targeted killing of Hassan Nasrallah and the stooges, the Iranian stooges that encircled him, that was in a 50-meter underground bunker, indicating, signaling the Iranians that Israel can go after the nuclear infrastructure, including the so-called very deep bunkers, and destroy those targets, those centrifuges. So the Iranians have to recalculate whether or not that is in their best interest to try and do that, absent also the S-300 PMU-2s that were in their possession. Not that it really was a tough challenge for Israel, since Syria has it as well, and it doesn't really effectively thwart Israel's capabilities in targeting Iranian infrastructure and entrenchment there. Nevertheless, doing it now with complete air superiority has placed Israel versus Iran in a different place altogether, with a favor of an administration that may yet again take office. This could change everything. However, my question is actually on another country in the region, Saudi Arabia. The last time when Trump was in office, it was pushing back on Iran's proxy in Yemen. Ansar Allah, dominated by the Houthi tribe. What is its incentive to do so again, knowing that it's just a one-term president in office? Having to calculate also potentially the consequences of a future transition that may yet again come and suppress it in a place of inferiority to Western adversaries.
Well, I think, first of all, Saudi Arabia is in a very different place than it was 8 years ago.
Right.
They have a young crown prince who will be the king just pretty soon. And he is going to reign for many, many decades. There will be consistent leadership. And he's already, but look at the modernization that's taken place in Saudi Arabia over the past 8 years. I mean, I was in Riyadh a couple months ago, and there are people from Israel walking around on the street who are outwardly Jewish in the street of Riyadh. I mean, this is unimaginable.
With foreign passports.
With foreign passports.
Right.
With foreign passports. But that's still unimaginable. They have gone through such a modernization. So I think it's a totally different situation. I think that, I mean, even if you look at the last 2 or 3 years of the Biden administration, sorry, Freudian slip there, they realize that they need to warm relations with Saudi Arabia for economic reasons, for geostrategic reasons. And so I actually think like a lot of that uncertainty has probably passed. The biggest fear that Saudi Arabia has is Iran's entrees to UAE and the continued threat that is coming out of Qatar. Iran is still trying to encircle Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And I think that they'll realize this may be the one opportunity to end this threat. That's again, once they get nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia will be living with the threat of Iran for 200 years.
It already announced that it intends to pursue nuclear weapons itself, if that is the case. And we shouldn't also forget that Saudi Arabia is bankrolling the nuclear program in Pakistan, including its arsenal. So, you know, that is also one of those scenarios that Israel is concerned about.
Well, they also have a long-standing agreement with the Pakistanis to be able to put Pakistani nuclear weapons on Saudi fighter jets.
Right, which is very significant, obviously. But Israel has pledged that this will not happen. Consecutive American administrations have pledged that Iran will not go nuclear, so to speak. However, over the years, and observing this very closely, the terminology has changed. And it's become more lenient as time progressed. Not with the Trump team, necessarily. I'm talking about the Bush team was very hawkish about this. Then the Obama team came in, and then it was about not becoming a threshold state. Then the Biden administration, suddenly we hear the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, retired General Rob Malley, coming out and saying, we will not allow Iran to have a fielded nuclear weapon. Something that he said first time actually on TV7, and I was quite taken aback by that remark. Are we going to go back into a position where the United States will once again guarantee the international community that Iran will never, ever attain a nuclear weapon?
Well, first of all, Mark Milley's comments come from a place of misunderstanding. Mark Milley sees every problem as essentially a conventional military problem, which means that if you tell him, and I spent a lot of time with Mark Milley on this topic when I was at the Pentagon. If you tell him we need to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, the first thing that his mind goes to is conventional military power. So, you know, ground invasion, boots on the ground. The reality is the issue of Iran for the United States is not a conventional problem. It's a regular warfare problem. And we do not need one American soldier on the ground in Iran to deal with the threat that they pose to the region and the world.
Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was very clear in Congress. He said, give us the tools and we'll do the job.
Right. Well, we don't even, and by the way, it doesn't mean no U.S. involvement.
Right.
It means partner with Israel, but our other partners. I mean, remember, Iran is trying to develop a nuclear capability that can reach Europe.
Right.
And they are doing terrorist attacks in Europe. And they are trying to do terrorist attacks in Latin America. They've done terrorist attacks. They're doing terrorist attacks in Asia. There's no shortage of people that want to make sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. But understandably, nobody wants another, Iraq too. They don't want Iraq too. So, but the problem is you have to understand, I think people outside of the United States don't get this, but the military leadership really at the Pentagon for the last 10 to 15 years, they are a product of the conventional wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. and they view everything as a conventional problem, not an irregular warfare problem. But President Trump, he's got this kind of like outside understanding of things, and he's willing to to push for change and also explore new methods of warfare. And so really, the U.S. has many, many, many tools in its toolbox to deal with Iran. I just want to comment on one other thing you said, which is what Bibi said in Congress. Give us the tools, and we will take care of this problem. So I think that actually points at one thing, which is that yes, Israel has successfully taken out the air defense systems, but projecting power into Lebanon, into Beirut is much easier than marshaling the power that's needed to hit multiple dispersed nuclear sites around Iran. And if you look at how many bunker-busting bombs Israel dropped in Beirut to get to that bunker, it was quite a number. So they need the munitions from the United States, which I believe the Trump administration will provide. But they also need the ability to have sustained air power over that area, which means refueling, overflight, the ability to have overflight, and
it wouldn't be a one-stop strike.
Right. It's complicated.
Right.
It will be it will be much more complicated than what happened in Beirut. I think they're 100% capable of it, but it's a degree more difficult.
Right. If we take the October 26th strike on Iran by Israel, the United States was a partner nation in this operation. Over a dozen air fuelers or tankers were sent to the region right before that. They didn't come out and declare, okay, we refueled Israeli aircraft, but being able to take 140 aircraft to such a long distance without that capability is just impossible. Now, going even one step further, the United States also had the JS ready to deploy in the event that an Israeli aircraft would be shot down. Both the Israeli 669 unit as well as their counterparts in CENTCOM JS would be rapidly deployed to salvage whatever is necessary. So I do see here a partnership that under CENTCOM specifically, General Michael Kurilla has been a true friend of Israel and a true American general who stands for the U.S. Constitution, for U.S. interests abroad. And that is something that I don't think is as robust these days as it used to be in the past. Hopefully, those things will change in the future. We don't have very much time left, and I do want to touch...
Well, I want to say one thing on Kurilla. So Kurilla is the first CENTCOM commander that had literally day one when he's in Israel's part of CENTCOM. All the CENTCOM commanders that came before, including McKinsey, Frank McKinsey, Frank had Israel's part of CENTCOM for part of his time there, but Kurilla was the one on day one. Israel's a country he has to work with. He has been amazing. And by the way, this is why all of a sudden now, it's not a surprise. I know the Pentagon very well. All of a sudden he's under investigation. He's under this fake investigation for something that apparently happened on his way to Israel. This is to me, I look at this and you have to laugh. You know what's going on there.
Right. Yeah, no, I reposted something Dr. Mike Duran posted on his Twitter account where he said he's been too effective in supporting Israel. It is sad to see this, and I hope that the U.S. intelligence community, the Defense Department, as well as state and other different departments will clean shop, so to speak, from all those who are countering U.S. interests globally on so many levels, because the manner in which they're acting is really, it's counterproductive to U.S. foreign policy and just doesn't make sense, and seeing on the campuses and streets of the United States people going out and burning the American flag. Again, I know it's not banned by the Constitution, but that is just a show of disrespect to what the United States stands for, and not just the United States, all of Western civilization at large. In 2 minutes, They're all yours.
Well, look, this is probably the most consequential election, not just for the United States, but really for the world. The world, we've got wars that are breaking out all over the world, like you said at the beginning. That is the direct result of American weakness and the weakening of America that's taken place under the current administration. It can get way worse. But having just returned from the Gulf, everybody there understands that a second Trump term means prosperity, security, peace in the region. They all see it. This isn't a mystery. Same thing in Europe. People in Europe, they know that they have a war. They have a Russian invasion of Europe, something that 20 years ago was unimaginable because there was a sense that America was weak. Our best chance for bringing back global stability, global peace is President Trump. And it's so interesting, right? Because the kind of the new world order, globalists, like all these people that say that we have to have a rules-based international order, they oppose him. The reality is he's the best thing for what they want: peace.
Right. No, I completely agree. I'll say just one final remark. I just came back from Europe, and I've spoken to diplomats, ministers, and different people of power throughout a couple of countries there. They all said to me the same thing. They said, we actually hope that Trump wins. And the reason for that is because they might not agree with the manner in which he relays whatever he wants to, but when it comes down to it, he enables his team to project power to the adversaries of Europe and the West at large. And that is something lacking today. Mr. Cohen, thank you so very much for all of your insights. Appreciate it. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.